Hello and welcome to Growthology. I'm your host, Carlos Hidalgo. And with me today, I have a good friend and someone who I think a lot of people will know by name, if not by picture or by video. Brent Adamson, welcome to Growthology.
Thank you, Carlos. It's always good to talk to my good friend. How are you, man?
I'm doing great. I am doing great. I hope you are as well.
Well, you're always doing great. So somewhere you wrote the book and now you're doing great. That's kind of how I think I think of your life. You found yourself, you wrote a book, and now it's like you found peace, which is beautiful. It really is.
Yeah, I have more. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. I used to work for him, and he said this to me, and I thought, wow, I haven't ever heard it put that way, but he was so spot on. He said, as long as I've known you, you lived life reactively. And I was like, wow, okay. And he said, but now I hear that he said, what I hear from you, and I can tell even just over the phone, and we spoke for an hour. He said, I hear peace. And I said, yeah. And again, some days are better than others. Yesterday I was finished and my wife was like, so how was your day? I was like, terrible.
But I'm at peace.
We're all going to have bad days. And a few weeks ago, I still live in the snowy white great north of New York State, and we had 14 inches of snow in April.
Dang, that's a backbreaker. Actually, it's the snow in May. That's the backbreaker. Like when you think you're like legitimately done, and May 4 you get 3 inches. It's like that's wrong. That's too much.
Well, that's how I felt 2.5, 3 weeks ago. And
Yeah.
power was going out and I kicked back on and I was supposed to have these calls. And I started to just get so wrapped around the axle. And finally by 11 a.m., I'm like, just accept the fact that this is going to be a day where you get nothing done, except maybe snow blowing the driveway if the snow blows, right? And once I accepted that, it was fine. And I was right. Nothing got done that day. And then shoveling, backbreaking heavy snow where the plows build up on your driveway.
Awesome.
Yeah. So it's good. But I'm thrilled to have you on the podcast. One of the things I try to do is always try to make a connection of like, where did we meet? And I'll be honest, I can't remember where we met. I think
Oh, really?
I think you had hosted one of the CEB roundtables and you sent an invite out and said, I'm bringing in some of the best and brightest from B2B marketing and sales. And I thought you got the wrong Carlos because I was like, I'm not really sure why I'm being invited to this, but I'm pretty sure that's where I met Dave Brock, who's been on our podcast.
Yep.
Met you for the first time, met Matt Dixon and Pat. And I think it was back then. So that it's been over a decade. And the fact that you still call me friend is a testament to your.
Well, I was just talking about this group the other night. So back in the day, this is about 2016 at CEB, which of course is now part of Gartner. My good friend Kelly Bloom, who was in charge of PR for CEB, or at least our part of CEB, she thought it'd be a good idea to essentially gather a bunch of leading experts in sales and marketing who specifically, no offense to you, yes, you were smart and damn good looking too, but neither of those were criteria. What was actually the criteria was size of audience, right? So who's got a big platform? Who has got access to tens of thousands of people? And thus Dave Brock, for example, who has, ungodly amount of subscribers to his newsletter. And let's get them together and essentially create a channel to distribute our insights and ideas out into the world through all of these people. Essentially, it was early influencer work. What none of us had counted on is the fact that we're going to get a room of really great people together who all over the years have become friends. That's how I met Brian Carroll. He's a good friend of yours. That's how I met Dave Brock. Drew Neisser was there. Andy Paul is a part of that group at some point. Sherry Leviton. I mean, on and on and on. Just really cool. Howard Dover. That's how I met Howard Dover. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I didn't know the backstory of that. I was always thrilled to be a part of it. I think I did 2 of those. And one of the things that you said.
And then you got too important for us. You were like, too good. As I don't need.
No, I think last time you did it, you gave me like 2 weeks notice. Was like, oh, hey, but.
What? I mean, come on, it is drop everything. And apparently not.
Brent called. I better be there.
I didn't call. Kelly called.
But you said something in one of those meetings, which I use a lot. And
what did I say now?
I'll give you credit for it. But I thought it was so important. You said, what would it, I think you asked the question and you were talking about, this is something you do with customers, is what would change in our business if we just operated from the premise that everybody's doing the best they can, people the benefit of the doubt, and that they're working with the best intentions. My makeup, honestly, is typically when I go into a new situation, I'm usually pretty cynical. I kind of look, and that really did change my thinking of
Wow.
everybody benefit of the doubt. Let them understand that they're most likely doing the best they can until they prove you wrong.
Right. Yeah.
I thought it was just a insightful thing. So if nothing else, I definitely walked away better for it. So thank you for that.
So, yeah, absolutely. You actually don't know this, but you have Adrian Norton to thank for that. So Adrian Norton is since retired. He was the global head of sales at Reckitt Benckiser. Before that, he was at one of the big health insurance companies. I'll come back to. It was Anthem, I think. But anyway, Adrian's become a dear friend of mine, and that was actually one of their core principles of the company. So each one of their conference rooms at their offices, back in the days when we had offices, was named after a core principle, and one of the core principles was assume your colleagues are working with good intentions. And every once I say that, someone is like, well, what do I do if they're a jerk? And it's like, okay, you missed the point, right? It's like, but it's actually, I found it to be, it's stuck with me as it has apparently stuck with you, which is super cool, is that it just, when you assume that people are really generally working with good intentions, it opens your mind to much more productive conversations. I suppose it does open you to a certain amount of risk, but I find over the time, on balance, it's been a risk absolutely worth taking. And it's proved to be very powerful for me too. That's cool. That stuck with you. That's neat.
Yeah. And I think other people pick up on that.
Yeah.
Especially in my world as, coming in, with a consultant or however you want to label, they think, oh, well, and we've been asked, so what you're saying is everything we've done to this point has been useless. I'm like, no, not at all. Let's find the and use that as a springboard.
You don't come in and say, well, you're hosed.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's like,
no, I can't believe you're actually still in business at all.
There's another question we get a lot. Are we the worst you've seen? I'm like, no, I only answered yes once. And
I guess no, I suppose you could answer yes more than once, but yeah, but that's not surprising. Tell me, so you and I haven't caught up in a while. So tell me about the new business and how it's going and what you guys are up to. I know you're supposed to be interviewing me, but we're here, man. Tell me what you're up to.
Yeah, when we started, we thought more about what kind of company do we want to be before we started talking about that. And that was totally different than any other business I had started before. So that was really fun to say, what do we, and we kind of landed on this thing is we want to do cool things with cool people. Now, I don't know if I'm cool. I'm in my 50s now. My daughter is still my bellwether on like, Dad, don't wear that, which is great. But that's what we settled on is let's do cool things with cool people. And so then we said, the last thing the world needs is another demand generation, marketing automation agency. I know now it's all about, everybody's changed their messaging to go to market. But what we said is we started to take a look at what we knew, said it is important that you drive engagement. In order to achieve sustainable growth, you have to have engagement at every stage of the customer lifecycle.
Yeah.
Brand engagement and all the way to what we kind of look at as an optimized state of customer advocacy. So what needs to happen in order to create that meaningful engagement with your customers? And so that's what we do. We help companies define those stages, understand what that meaningful, keyword being meaningful, is at every stage, and then look at internally and say, who's responsible for that engagement? And then how do you align your data and your processes and your technology to drive that engagement? And so we talk about Digital Exhaust as a growth partner, and we help make growth simple.
So tell me I want to dig in about 14 different things, but tell me about the word meaningful. So that's because that's the word I wrote down. I wrote down the word meaningful.
Yep.
Tell me more. Because this could lead to there's some things I want to dig in on that, but tell me what meaningful means to you.
Yeah.
Or who defines meaningful? I'd be like 1,000 questions, but why? Tell me what meaningful is here in this context.
I think it starts with humanity. And I think in B2B, I heard you talk about this, right? In B2B, we've lost this idea that we sell to humans.
Yeah.
We don't sell to We don't sell to accounts. We don't sell to leads, whatever we want to call it. They're human beings. I think part of understanding what meaningful means depends on the customer and understanding that now you're selling to buying groups, many people who have different biases towards a brand or a purchase or what they need, understanding that at a micro level to say, okay, this individual or these types of individuals. So rather than looking at CEOs all operate this way, understand the type of person that they are, where they may just want the facts, which is fine. Yeah. So give it in a way that's going to be helpful to them, in a way that's going to help them make the most informed decision possible. And so if I can start with the humanness as the center and say, what do they want to feel at this stage? Do they want to feel like they can trust us? Do they want to feel entertained? Do they want to feel like they've been informed? Do they want to feel educated? Understanding those different components throughout that journey and understanding that throughout that full journey, that full customer journey, there's going to be a lot of things that shift and change. Then we can start to identify what is that meaningful interaction, whether it's digitally or whether it's person to person or whether it's
so would you say meaningfulness, is that a word? I think that's a word, but the is contextual. So it depends. So because you talked about, so far we've got on the table multiple different people with multiple different or multiple perspectives and priorities and multiple touch points. We got digital versus human at different points across a purchase journey or a decision journey. There's a lot, isn't it? And so is meaningfulness then contextual? Like it depends on which person with which need at what point in what channel, or is it no, and it doesn't matter. It's all the same thing. The meaningful boils down to humanness, or is it? Tell me more about that, because I've got a take on this. I'm leading somewhere, I think, but I want to get your take on it in a second. But tell me how you think about it.
I think it's a yes and.
Okay. Oh, that's everybody's answer now. That is like the in answer. If you want to be cool these days, you say yes and. It's like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I finally riled up. I love it.
I'm just so tired. I got lectured before. I think it was at Gardner. I don't even remember. Somewhere in my life in the last 2 years, like, Brent, you're supposed to say yes and not yes but. It's like, oh God, come on. Sometimes they're wrong. It's yes, baby.
I really do. What drives me nuts is when people go, it's a yes and you're like,
yeah. It's such the stylish thing to say now. If you want to be cool.
No, I don't care about being cool. I'm married to a woman who's loved me for more than 30 years through thick and thin. So I don't have to, I try to impress her.
Yeah. How's that working out for you?
Better. But the reason I say that is I think there has to be some continuity at the brand level. Say, great, I've won your trust, and then trash that trust the rest of the.
Sure.
I can't say, hey, we've built some kind of relationship around you now trust me as a brand, and making it increasingly difficult for you to purchase my product or my service, because that. So there's some just common threads that have to be consistent throughout every part of that journey. But again, contextually comes down to, there are people that are more wired where they want that warm, fuzzy feeling. Once they make a initial purchase, they want to be reassured that you made the right purchase. They have that buyer's remorse. There's other people who are like, we made it, let's go, let's move. I don't have time for this. I'm too busy. We're seeing that today with you and Matt were talking about it at one point, the whole idea of ghosting. And you made the point is, it's not about you, right? And we deal with big enterprise companies. We also deal with startups. But what I have to always say is tell myself and remind myself, yes, I'm engaged with this individual, and from my perspective, I should be most important. But the reality is they probably have 20 other things on their plate that are all competing priorities, that they've all invested something in, whether monetarily or otherwise. So what is going to make me stand out to the point where it's going to help them do their job better? And so that's talk about that context, is you got to really understand the cognitive style of a lot of these individuals and how they're operating. And again, we're trying to do this at a macro level across multiple segments of multiple audiences.
Yeah.
But if we can start to narrow in on that just a little bit and then bring that committee together, instead of having them just default to the status quo, we're going to have that meaningful engagement. And then we get to measure and optimize how we're driving that meaningful engagement. And it's one of the reasons why I think still, even though we have AI and all these things, it's so vitally important to get out and talk to your customers and set up calls, understand who they are, what are they dealing with, what keeps them awake at night, what pains are they feeling, and then what is prohibiting them from moving forward on a certain initiative. So there's a lot there.
There's a lot there, right? So let me ask you this. Can I let me run something by you, because you're smart. I trust you.
Fun.
You're really freaking smart, and you're smarter than I am, and I trust your judgment.
That's all right.
So everything you said, I agree with, and I think is true. Not that I don't have bar charts to prove it, but it's a lot. It's your point. You said it yourself. It's a lot, and it's complex. what if I were to try, because I'm a simple man, you know this, I'm from Nebraska, where the N stands for knowledge, right? And so I like to boil things down, sometimes oversimplifying them, and as a result. But I think I could boil down meaningfulness to one idea. And I want to get your take on this, okay? So, and I think it goes through the front door of humanness, which or humanity, as you mentioned. So the book, I'm writing the next book, and the opening line is, it's a selling story and it's a buying story, but really what it is, it's a human story. And because I find maybe it's all those liberal arts degrees I collected in my 20s. I keep coming back to the core humanity of B2B commerce, at least for now. I've got a good friend at Gartner named Don Scheibenreif, and Don and his colleague just wrote a book about machines selling to machines, and it's super interesting stuff. And we're just going to take that whole idea and park it over here, because there will come a day when algorithms are selling and buying from each other,
Sure.
right?
At a certain level.
Right. Well, although all that does is it kicks the human story not out, but up. But again, park it. I get the striking time shiny object. Ooh, let's talk about that. But if you open up the front door of humanity and step through, I think what you find on the other side, that was very metaphorical, what you find is affirmation. And I think that's what meaningfulness ultimately is affirmation. It is, if you are very much like, remember where we started this conversation, it's like assume your colleagues are working with good intentions. Assume that, I think if one were to assume that the number one most powerful way that you could create a meaningful affirmation is to create a meaningful interaction, I should say, is to focus on affirmation. I think you'd be right at least 80 to or higher % of the time. And so, and it manifests in different ways, right? So, but the point is, what I'm solving for here, and I think this is true not just about selling and commerce, it's about, again, human relations, it's about friendships and marriages, is as I'm interacting with you, how can I solve for your perception, not of me, but how can I solve for your perception of you? How can I come out of this interaction in such a way that Carlos feels a little bit better about Carlos as a result of this interaction, not so much feels better or different about Brent? Because we all solve for, in fact, you just said it earlier, it's meaningful. How can I create an interaction so that they trust us? It's like, how can I create an interaction so they trust themselves, right? So an affirmation, maybe, I'm really freaking smart, and I've talked to Carlos, and I know I'm really smart. Or I'm not really sure, but I talked to Carlos, now I am sure. I had some doubts, but I talked to Carlos, and now I feel a little bit better. But one way or another, it's about helping people feel more affirmed, either more seen, more understood, more correct, more confident in themselves. Again, I think if we could either come at the word meaningful from many, many stakeholders across many, many different challenges, many different jobs to be done, many different channels. Oh my God, meaningful is contextual and it's always different and it's always hard. It's like, boy, you could build a whole business off of that and make a lot of money. Or we could say, meaningfulness is always one thing. More often than not is one thing. It's how can I help people feel better about themselves and the choices they're making? I think, I don't know.
No, I think one of the things I've said often, and we teach our
yeah.
is your job is, as crazy as this sounds,
yeah,
your job in marketing and sales is not to get your target buyer to buy your product.
Right.
If you really want to win in the marketplace and differentiate, your marketing and your sales have to be there to help your customer and or prospective buyer to make the most informed decision possible, which at times will not be you.
Yeah.
And when you state that, when you come at it from that perspective, to your point, I think it lowers the skepticism of a potential customer. It enables a buyer or a current customer to say, hey, maybe it's time for us to move off. And maybe, crazy concept, this brand will help me transition out to bring that experience to bear. But I think if you develop that framework and that mindset of my marketing and sales are all here to help my customers make the most informed decision possible, which then enables them to do their job at a better level. Back to your point, it's helping them feel better about themselves.
Let me get your thoughts this week.
Sure.
So rather than, because the solutions are very different. If my goal is to help my customers make the most informed decision possible, the way I would solve for that logically is to give them as much information as I possibly could. Because the more information I have, the more informed I am. Saying I was this informed, now I've got more information, now I'm more informed. At some point, as you know, we all know from psychology, is at some point, with more information, you start becoming more overwhelmed. You're more informed objectively because you consume more information, but often as that information conflicts, as it overlaps, as it starts repeating itself, you become more overwhelmed. So I'm wondering if rather than how do I help them make the most informed decision possible, how do I help them feel that they're making the most informed decision possible? Because in that one, I'm not solving for the amount of information or consumption. I'm solving for a feeling. which seems subtly different, but it's actually, I think, radically different.
Yeah,
You buy that?
I can sign up for that. Now, where I'm going is there's an example where years ago we got a call from
Yeah.
a CMO, went on site, met with her, and all she wanted to do at the point of conversation was create a new lead score model. So this tells you.
Okay. By the way, it's not a bad idea.
That's all fine and good.
Mm-hmm.
I said, but there's so much else behind the lead scoring. I said, I don't even know if you guys have the right ICP, if you guys have the right segmentation model. And she started to get frustrated. And I said, look, I'm not here to just sell you. I said, I don't want to get into an engagement where we build something that's a fraction of what you need. I mean, this is what you guys wrote about in Challenger, right?
Right.
So build a fraction of what you need, and then you walk away, and what we built may work, but only to a point, and then you're very dissatisfied with the service. And I said, and she said, so what you're telling me is if I just kind of put my line in the sand here, you won't take my business. I said, that's exactly what I'm telling you. And I said, I'd love to work with you. So we ended up spending like 2 hours on a whiteboard in a conference room together, going back and forth. So it wasn't an overload of information, but it was the information she needed at that point to then say, okay, I feel good about this decision. I feel good about investing more. I feel good that I can bring this to my executive team and everybody align around it. So that's kind of what I'm getting at. So I think we're saying pretty much the same thing, but I like the idea of the feeling of, but at the same time, that feeling can't be manipulation. You can't manipulate.
Well, there's truth in that. I mean, that and it's a fine line I struggle with because I don't know exactly where it is. But I mean, in some ways, I've built a whole career out of manipulating people. I would hopefully, I would hope to like a positive end, but I mean, that's part of being a storyteller, right? Which is much of what I do for a living is storytelling. And it's like storytelling is all about manipulation. I'm trying to, if you think about it, even from a positive, very sort of, what's the word, with good intentions, right? Is I'm trying to evoke a response or an emotional reaction in you. And just the very nature of trying to evoke a reaction, an emotional reaction in you is, I think, definitionally manipulative, whether it's for a good purpose or to good ends or not. So I struggle with, Brian Carroll and I got in a very similar discussion years ago about the word empathy. And it's like, because as you know, it's a very important idea to him and his research. And we had this big discussion about like whether empathy could be used for evil as much as it can, or is it always good? Or can I like get inside your head, see the world from your perspective, and then use it in a manipulative sort of way to actually cause all sorts of harm and chaos? You caught me on a rambling afternoon, Carlos. Sorry, we should bring this. But what do you want to talk about? Sorry, we talked about what I want to talk about. What do you want to talk about?
I really, this is why I love having conversations with you. But I don't think if I'm writing and you're an author, I'm an author. We've written our books. I love the stories. If I ever come back in another life, I'm going to come back as a stand-up comedian because I just love to tell stories, and I love to make people laugh. So, but I don't think evoking an emotional response is the same as manipulation. If I'm trying to convey to you,
I think definitionally it is. So we're talking about denotation versus connotation here, perhaps. But if something is this state and I do something and change it to that state, I have manipulated it somehow, right? As opposed to if manipulative means I'm like, can I manipulate you, right? Exactly, right. That's the connotation. But I think denotation, it is manipulative. I mean, there's an up and a downside to all of these things.
Right. Okay, so here's a question for you and maybe the last, I don't know, 20 minutes of conversation have already, you built yourself as a productive disruptor. And when I read that, because I don't know of anybody who likes to be disrupted less than me.
Huh? You sold your house and moved your life into a camper. Are you kidding me? You can't tell me you don't like disruption. I call BS.
No. Let's be very clear. That was my wife's idea. And talk about it.
You hated every second of it.
Oh, once I got in there, I liked it. But let me tell you, she was a master because what she did, we were kicking around all kinds of ideas. We knew we were in Colorado, kicking around all kinds of ideas. And then COVID hit, which obviously, put a kibosh on a lot of our ideas. And so she said, well, why don't we look at an RV? And my brain just like, it cramps because I couldn't like understand this because I don't pivot well. If you doubt that, you need to talk to her. So then she got very smart and said, and she wouldn't let it go, but she wasn't pestering. She just kept bringing it up. And then she
Yeah.
said, if we do a fifth wheel, we would have to get a heavy duty truck. Now, I'll be honest. I don't know what she said after heavy duty truck. I went into dreamland because all I've ever wanted was a heavy duty pickup truck. And like, I was sold at that point.
It's an amazing story. Is this why you sold your home and traveled around the world in an RV? Because you got to have a truck.
He could have said, and to do that, we have to join this cult and I signed up for everything and anything after that because I was getting heavy duty. That's storytelling. That's really good.
That's good stuff. Yeah.
But anyway,
all right. So productive.
Yeah, explain that.
You're almost like a young kid with a truck under the Christmas tree.
And I sold that truck to renovate the house we live in, and I still have a truck, but it's not the heavy duty Ram that we had. And I think about that truck
all the time. Did it have a bullet casing instead of an antenna like they do in Michigan sometimes? No.
Kept it classy.
All right. Did it have a gun rack? Did it have a gun rack?
We didn't have a gun rack, but this thing was pimped out. I had seats that would heat and in the summertime would cool.
Yeah. Which versus like a Maybach or something, not a Ram pickup truck.
This thing was amazing. It had a full back seat, like my 6'2" son could sit in and stretch his legs. I had a screen on this thing, which would rival some people's home television. And
hilarious.
I mean, there were times I would just want to go sit in it. And so anyway, I hope someday I will get back to the RV lifestyle. We've put a pin in it. It's a desire of us. But all that to say, I hate being disrupted. But you're saying there's a thing as productive disruption.
Well, let me ask you this, because I think we've known each other a long time. We're not besties, but we know each other pretty well. Heck, we even tried to start a company together for a while, right? So I think I know the answer, but I'll just ask you, do you like to learn?
I love to learn.
Exactly, right? That's one of the things I love about you is you love to learn. That's productive disruption.
Okay. So learning.
That's an example of it, certainly, right? So I think to me, and again, it's all these liberal arts degrees, I think to me, meaning is created in a dialectic, right? It's created in the contrast between two things. It's like something really isn't something so much as it is not something else. And so when you really create meaning, it's because you're contrasting something to something else. And in that contrast, that exercise of contrasting, you're constructing similarities and differences in all sorts of interesting ways. And you take it compared to something else, you get different contrasts, right? And all of that and when you do that productively, it stretches your thinking. It gives you new ways to look at problems and at solutions and at things like identity and politics and all sorts of interesting things. And it to me, it's the idea of loving to learn, of loving to it's asking, it's the open mindset versus a closed mindset of always asking, what else is there? What else could there be? And you only can really do that productively if you're open to disruption. And that's what learning really is, right? So if you think of like schema theory, you can hang new things. You have a scaffold that is psychologically, right? This sort of scaffold is a mental model, a set of ideas in your head. And as new information comes in, you hang the new information off of that scaffold, off that mental model. And over time, you realize, hey, I got this thing I got to hang. Oh, there's nowhere to hang it. Where do I put this one? It's like, oh, I've got to either, think my mental model, or I've got to significantly rethink my mental model. But you have to get to a place where you can rework it. And a lot of people, to be totally fair, find that really uncomfortable. They find it exhausting. They find it scary more than anything else. And I think, oftentimes they find it scary because they find it exhausting, which I totally get. And so that leads to, and for a lot of people, it actually kicks in your flight reflex. Like, I will run away from that. And it's what most of us do with 8th grade algebra, right? Ooh, that is not productive. I'm going to run away from that. It's too terrifying. So I think it's really interesting to me. And again, before I do what I do now, I mean, I've been an educator my whole life, but I was a professor for 15 years, teaching German and linguistics of all things. And it was always interesting to me to ask these really interesting questions about how do I teach someone something, get a new idea into their head, just to get them to say, I've never really thought about it that way before. That's interesting. For someone to say, I've never thought about it that way before, and not feel threatened is productive. That's productive. So it's disruptive because it's forcing me to take a mental model and examine it. I may ultimately decide to keep the mental model, but I'll probably modify it at least a little bit, if not a lot. But to do it in a way that makes me feel excited, interested, intrigued, at least engaged, that's productive, as opposed to threatened, afraid, tired, and to drive you into retreat mode such that you calcify that mental model as opposed to open it up to review. That would be unproductive disruption.
I like that definition. And
Do you remember that fable when we were kids that like the sun and the wind were talking and there's a guy and walking down the street in a coat and they have a contest to see who can get the guy to take his coat off? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do not. I've not heard that fable, but I'm now
Welcome to the wonderful non sequitur of my mind, right? It all makes sense up there somehow.
effectively disrupting me right now.
All right, so the wind and the sun are having the discussion, and they're having a contest, like who's stronger and who can make people do things, right? And there's apparently this guy walking along the street in a coat. So so the wind says, "I'm stronger. I can make that guy. Watch this. I'm going to blow so hard. I'm going to get that guy to take off his coat." And so the wind blows and blows and blows, and the harder the wind blows, the tighter the guy pulls his coat around him to the point where he's like grasping and really, really hard, and the wind's blowing hard, and finally the wind wears out, and the guy is still there with his coat on. And the sun says, well, let me give it a try. And then it's just sun comes out and warms up the world, and the guy gets kind of warm. He says, oh, I'll take off my coat. Right. That's the difference. That's productive versus disruptive disruption.
Yeah. No, maybe. And honestly, you've helped me frame that, because maybe that's what I don't like: unproductive disruption.
Right.
Being disrupted for the sake of being disrupted. But to your point, I love to learn.
Right.
And I wouldn't say always, that's a big word. I try to stay in a place to say, all right, this is what I know, but is there a different way? Is there a better way? So I always hear about this, leaders are vivacious readers. I'll be honest, I'm not.
Same here.
What I do is I will read alternative views. I will read reports. I will read research. I read our competitors. I look at all of their information and their content, because I want to know, all right, well, maybe they are doing it a different way. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong.
Totally. Right.
But it'll help shape what I do potentially in a better way. It'll help me frame something in a different way. And I remember you guys also talked about that, as using competitors' content and then commentary around that. And it's so amazing. I hear like, oh, you guys talk to this one. I'm like, yeah, we're competitors. Just because we're competitors doesn't mean off the field we're enemies. I'm friends with so many people that you could put in that competitor bucket, but at the same time, I learned so much from them, and it's such a value to have those relationships. I can't imagine where I'd be if we didn't have those relationships.
Yeah, I agree. Well, what it also means is I engage in a lot of debate and discussion, which can be really exhausting, both to the people around me and to me myself. But you and I have already done it on this call. When I started digging on meaningful at the beginning of this conversation, I was super intrigued by I think I know how I think of the word meaningful, but I'm not sure I want to test these ideas. How do you think about meaningful? What I was doing there was not trying to, because I know you well enough and I know you trust our relationship well enough. I knew I could do that. But for someone, it's possible that if I were to do to someone else what I did to you, they'd feel threatened by that. He's asking about meaningful. I just basically laid out the plan of my business and he's picking at it. It's like, what the bleep, what a jerk, right? And all I'm trying to do is come to like, I got this idea and you've got this idea. And for me, it's play. It's almost like jazz. It's like, so what if meaningful meant this? What if it was about a feeling and not about a knowing? What if it was about affirmation? And what I'm really, for me, the ultimate gold, the nugget is when, and it doesn't always happen, when someone says something where it makes me go, I never thought about it that way before. I'm always in the pursuit of that. For me, that is my drug. My drug is learning something, seeing something that gets me to say, I never thought about it that way before. And I enjoy, oftentimes I'm teaching, not because I'm trying to teach, but because I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to get someone to push back and say, no, you're full of crap. Here's a better way to look at it. And for me to push back on them and go back and forth, and for them to ultimately, quote unquote, win, for me to say, oh, crap. Oh, that's pretty good. I never thought of it that way before. That's like a
and I think to have, as we've started our business, to have that pressure tested. If I look at the messaging we launched with, where we're at today, they're completely different. And it took, part was we started sending out some things to trusted colleagues saying, hey, we'd love your feedback on this. And then Erica Goldwater, we sat down and I showed her our first slide, and in true Erica fashion, she went,
so much for affirmation.
Like, you just sound like everybody else. She's like, so what is, and then James Carberry at Sweetfish, he's got this idea, and I kind of love it. He's like, you got to have an enemy. What's the enemy? And our enemy for our clients is the complexity. And so, what we talked about in terms of meaning can get very complex. You can still, what we say is it's sophisticated, but it can be done simply. So the idea of trying to map every single touch point that all the customers have throughout their buying journey, and you got committees of 9 to 15 people. I mean, how do you even begin to try to do that rather than
Yeah.
just saying, let's simplify that journey. Let's simplify the interaction. Let's simplify the content that you need. Because if a CEO or CFO isn't involved in the purchase process, why are you creating CFO content? It makes no sense. So,
Totally. Yeah.
all of that, if we weren't pressure tested, we'd still be off running thinking that we're the smartest guys around, and people are going, yeah, so what? What makes you different? So it's important.
It is 100%. Yeah. So productive disruption for me is not really a, it's, I guess it sounds a little bit like a tagline, but it's actually just sort of a way of life. It's the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning.
Well, I appreciate you explaining
Yeah,
it.
sure. Yeah.
Disruption gave me a little bit of a tick. So,
but no, it can't if it's productive, right? So if it's giving you a tick, then it's not productive. Then it doesn't work. See what I mean?
it was just the word. It was just
exactly right.
Now I have a new word association, so I won't be as bothered.
But it was a little bit of an irritant out of which one creates a pearl. See, that's the beauty of it, right? Yeah. You like that?
My favorite is when people go, "Hey, I'm sorry to disrupt you," or "Can I disrupt you?" And I just want to respond and say, "Well, you just..."
No, it's too late. That's like my brother. And when we shared bunk beds in the bedroom when we were little kids, he'd say, "Hey, Brent." He's like, "What? Brent, what? Brent?" If I say, "What?" And he'd say, "Are you asleep?"
Not anymore.
Right, not anymore.
Exactly.
It's God bless it, kid. Leave me alone.
Hey, in terms of having people think about things differently, I would say that the traditional B2B marketing, sales, and marketing roles, I think I said,
are obsolete.
The B2B sales and marketing roles are obsolete. Give me more on that. Give us some background.
All right. So to be fair to me, you've never heard me say it because I've never said it. But there is an article with my name on it.
Have you?
Well, I wrote an article for HBR, for the digital version of HBR. I've written numerous articles for HBR. That sounded like arrogant. I didn't mean it that way, but it's a very privileged, cool thing to be able to write for HBR sometimes. But I wrote one on the changing dramatically, or potentially the potential to dramatically change and rewrite the roles of sales and marketing. And they, in their wisdom, gave it the title, "Traditional Sales and Marketing Have Become Obsolete." So I didn't say it, they said it. So this is, when you write for other people, they put the headlines on stuff. And sometimes the headlines they put on things like, I don't know if I would have gone to that one.
But I love that because you spent a lot of time researching, and for people who don't know you, you've spent a lot of time in this space, digging in, meeting with name brand companies to really kind of pull that apart to be a productive disruptor. This wasn't like one day you woke up and thought, "Oh, I'm going to write something provocative." This had a lot of research behind it. So have you kind of...
In a lot of ways, it goes back to a keynote that I presented as part of corporate executive board, again, just then became CEB, that became Gartner. But back in the CEB days, as you'll remember, because you used to come every once in a while, we do these big sales marketing conferences out in Vegas every year. And it was really the one event where we get heads of sales and heads of marketing together. And of course, one of the first things that Gartner did when they took over is they split them back apart, which was just such a shame. I mean, there was internal reasons why Gartner did this. So I don't mean it as a knock, but one of the results of that, outcomes of that, was we lost this really cool opportunity to get sales and marketing together. Because when we built the keynotes for that conference, that was always the question of, like, how do we build a keynote that speaks to both heads of marketing and heads of sales simultaneously for the course of 60 minutes. And so out of that idea, I had created, based on the research we'd done that year, I think a really powerful message around buying behavior and how buying behavior is changing. This is 2016. It's not 2024. So what seems like obvious now at the time was pretty disruptive. And it was data-driven evidence that irrespective of where they were along the purchase journey, customers were as likely to use digital channels as they were human channels for just about any particular job or buying task across a B2B buying journey. That effectively B2B buyers have become channel agnostic. I'll work with a human. I'll talk to a human. I'll do this on your website. There's Gartner, a little bit before I left 2 years ago. Some of that we were just starting when I left, and some of that they've done since then. Some really interesting is about the value of a human interaction. There's still some just specific value to interacting with the humans. Really, really interesting. But for now, though, what was interesting is this really powerful conclusion that wherever you are on the buying journey, early, middle, or late, the role of digital customers in engaging with you through digital channels is be incredibly important. Now, that matters because, you've been around marketing longer than I have. World of marketing, B2B marketing, has traditionally been, if you think about, all right, so who owns the digital experience of a company, of a B2B company? That is almost always marketing, right? So if I think digital, I think marketing. And if I think human interactions, I think sales. So marketing equals digital, sales equals human. But the other thing that traditionally has been the case as well is that marketing is largely lived up funnel in demand gen, right? And in brand building and then demand gen and getting things into the pipeline. Past a certain point in the pipeline, after it's a marketing qualified lead in MQL, then it gets handed off to sales and then for sales to pursue to conclusion. So it's marketing owns digital and early, and sales owns human and late. And that works as long as customers are engaging with you in digital early and through humans late. But what was happening, as we were seeing in our data, is that was no longer the case. As customers became channel agnostic, all of a sudden our org structure that was designed to make sense for a world that no longer exists was quickly becoming out of step with the way customers buy, right? So what we built, the way I put it then is, I stick by the language because I think it's powerful. We built what I called the serial commercial engine. So first the marketing, then the sales, first the digital, then the human. And what we really needed to do, rather than building the serial commercial engine, was build the parallel commercial engine. That is where marketing, digital and human were sort of running in parallel. And as a result, sales and marketing were running in parallel. And then the ultimate conclusion of that is once you start getting into that world, you start looking and realizing, well, the traditional, at least, definitions of sales and marketing no longer fit. Because if marketing is about digital and sales is about human, if marketing is about early and sales is about late, those things in this world don't work that way anymore. So at the very least, we need to completely redefine what is marketing, what is sales, or maybe just not have them at all, thus becoming obsolete. At that keynote was a guy named Jeff Lowe. Jeff is a very, very good friend of mine. He at the time was the chief marketing officer at a company called Smart Technology. So they sell the smart boards or the TV screens, the projectors in your kids' classrooms at schools, among other things. They're based out of Calgary. Jeff's Canadian, he's an amazing human being. Jeff was there at that keynote, and because he's Jeff Lowe and he's freaking brilliant, he said, that's smart, makes sense, let's build it. And over the course of the next 3 years, he went on a longer journey of essentially taking that core idea and redesigning the entire commercial engine at Smart. So he and, at the time, Jenna Pipchuk, who was their head of sales, and Jenna since departed for other reasons, and she's great too, she's also a good friend. But Jenna and Jeff dismantled sales, marketing, success, and service, the whole thing, entire commercial engine. They took it all the way down to first principles, blank sheet of paper. No one lost their job, everyone kept their job, but they started and they built it back up, not around functions or channels, but they built it back up around customer buying jobs. So what are the jobs that customers need to do or to complete to their satisfaction in order to make a purchase happen? And then they designed teams around those jobs. So there was I don't have it right in front of me. I used to have this memorized. It's been a while since I've done this riff, but they have a learning. So one of the jobs that customers have to engage is learning, right? So they had a learning team, and that learning team was comprised of people maybe traditionally in sales, maybe traditionally in content, maybe traditionally in marketing, maybe traditionally as subject matter experts, maybe on the digital side, maybe in the human side, subject matter experts. But it was all the people on the team, irrespective of channel, irrespective of legacy function, who helped customers learn. That was a team. And then they did so with all the other jobs. And then the way that they went to market was they'd take representatives from each of those buying jobs or those teams and put them together in a pod, and they would go to market in a pod structure so that pod was run off of a single, what they called this the unified commercial, they still do, by the way, the unified commercial engine, the UCE. And they would create a unified commercial dashboard, a UD, I guess. And so this team, this like Southwest United States, had representatives from each of those different teams, all being metriced together on a set of metrics that traditionally look like legacy marketing, legacy success, legacy sales. That pod was responsible for that whole run of metrics. And that to me just seems logical. If its legacy structures aren't consistent with the way customers buy, then let's build. It's easy for me to say this, by the way, but logically, it's all I do is I'm a researcher, so I talk logically. Logically, let's dismantle it and remantle it, redesign it around what's actually happening. What I found, I'll promise I'll come up for air here in a second, Carlos, but real quick, the thing that was interesting to me is when I showed this to Gartner, my colleagues at Gartner, I actually brought in Jeff and Jenna. We did an interview with them, a brown bag with just internal Gartner people, and got them kind of excited about it. But 3 months later, I realized no one at Gartner, our analyst team, was talking to our clients about it. And I went back and I'd ask them, I said, well, why aren't you sharing? It's like, they were very honest. They'd say, Brent, every time we tried to tell the story to someone, they won't have it. They just reject it outright. And I said, what do you mean? And I said, well, they'll say things like, well, we're small and Smart's big, or we're big and Smart's small, or they're in tech and we're in biofuels, or we're in a different industry. We have a different size. We have a different customer base. They go indirect. We go direct. We go direct. They go indirect. They had 1,000 different reasons of why it wouldn't work. And everyone just dismissed it outright. And yet I think it's the smartest thing I've seen. So there's a footnote to the story I'll tell you in a second, but that's what, so I've been known for saying sales and marketing is obsolete. Again, I didn't use the word obsolete. That was a Harvard Business Review word, but that's what I was getting at. There you go. It's a long answer.
There's two things that in that story, and I've heard that before and I love it. There's two things that stand out to me. One, they made this, that they aligned around their customer.
Yeah.
They
100%.
didn't align around traditional roles. They didn't, to your point, they didn't align around channels. And I still see this. Well, I do top of funnel campaigns. So I've never heard a buyer say I'm in the marketing qualified lead stage in my buying process. Right?
Totally.
So align around your customer and all of the different things that they know. And I'm drawing a blank, but it's the Christensen, the jobs to be done. What are the jobs?
Yeah.
So that's number one. Number two, the pushback of brands, that's a fear of change.
Yeah.
To me, I'm like, if you're not changing, you're dying.
Yeah.
Our world today is so much different than it was even when I wrote my book, Driving Demand, back in 2015.
Yeah.
16 doesn't mean they're obsolete. It just means it probably needs a rewrite or some updating, but there's still some principles. But if we're not looking to, if we're going to be as marketing leaders and sales leaders, obstinate and say, I can't change, and then make an excuse as to why I'm not changed, eventually the market is going to outpace you so far, it's impossible to grow. At least that's my...
Do you really think people aren't doing it because they're obstinate? See, here's my take. I guess I meant that as a rhetorical question. Let me give you my answer, my take, and I think they're doing, I don't know if I was going to say they refused it. I don't know if they're refusing, but they tend not to do it. They shy away from it because they're scared.
Fear. Yeah, sure.
Right. I think it's, I don't know if it's obstinacy, like, I just won't do it. I think it's actually, if you really root cause it and dig down under the surface. And this comes to that footnote I mentioned earlier, is because in this interview I was doing with Jeff and Jenna, again, friends of mine now. Isn't that cool at our age? Because we're both mid-50s, right? You're younger than me, you bastard. But we're at that point in our careers where your clients have become friends. It is one of the coolest things for anyone, if there's all 3-4 people listening to this podcast, because I was on it, for those of you who might be younger, there comes a point in your career where your clients become some of your best friends in the world. And it's not something that's on my radar screen. And it's one of the most fulfilling things for me professionally, full stop. It is so cool. What's interesting is, though, when I was interviewing Jeff and Jenna, because I was really baffled by this. I meant this quite sincerely, and I still do. I said, how did you guys do this? Because I knew what was going to happen. I knew other companies were going to look and say, I can't do that. Because that's been my 20 years of my career. It's like, people are, I can't do that. I can't do this. I can't do that. And nobody can freaking do anything, right? So it's like, so they're going to look at this. So I figured I'd get ahead of it. I said, Jeff, tell me, you're the chief marketing officer and you just eliminated marketing. Jenna, you're the chief sales officer. You just eliminated sales. How does that even work? How do you take your entire budgets, your FTEs, your people, your titles, your functions, all of it, and wipe it out and start with a clean piece of paper? How can you? That's terrifying. I mean, how do you do that? And Jeff said to me in front of all these 20 colleagues at Gartner, he said, it was Brent, is actually, he said two things. First, he says, we could CEO buy-in. Like, let's just check that box. Like, if your CEO is against this, don't even try, right? But he said, but then he looked at me like I was an idiot almost, and he didn't. But he's like, it's because we trust each other.
There it is.
Right? Isn't that wild? That was the single most powerful question that it was so simple, it blew me away. I didn't even know what to say to that, because I realized, oh crap, that's why this isn't going to happen. That's exactly why this won't happen. It's because, and so, it's like, they're big, we're small, we're different. I won't accept any of those excuses, because I think, but I will accept they're Canadian and we're not. That is the one reason why other companies can't do this, because Canadians are just better human beings. They're just it's like, I would do just about anything with a Canadian. They're better people.
I think that, we talk about it in terms of a brand and a consumer, or a brand and a customer, the inner workings of an organization. I was talking to a colleague the other day and kind of helping her navigate some things. And she made the phrase, she said, the bottom line is, I can't work for someone I don't trust. And I'm like, I know many people who can do it in a way. I'm like, how do you work where you're always looking over your shoulder? And so I think this kind of comes full circle, as getting back
to
the benefit of the doubt. Give people the benefit of the doubt that they're doing the best they can. Trust that that's factual until they prove you wrong.
100%.
If you're wrong, then you can address it. You can take steps to
and it's so much of what sales is built on right now in this sort of uncertain economy, and renewal-based businesses where people aren't renewing and everybody's focused on expansion with existing customers, and they keep coming. Everybody I talk to, CROs, heads of customer success, chief success officers, you name it, they all come back to this word trust. And what's interesting to me is every one of us is looking at this trust opportunity, trust challenge, trust problem, whatever. They're looking at trust through the lens of, do you trust me? Or how do I help you? And particularly in sales years, like, we need to be our customer's trusted advisor, which is, that term has become such an empty vessel into which everyone will pour anything, which is a bummer because the guy who came up with it is an amazing human being. But I think this is the thing we're all missing. And this is why I'm writing the next book and building a company around it, is I think the better opportunity isn't to ask yourself, how do I get customers or colleagues to trust me? It's, how do I become the agent, the engine, the force that through interaction with me helps people trust themselves a little bit better? Because in doing that, that trust will come back to you. You win. This thing, the shortest route to winning trust of others is to help them be the agent that helps them trust themselves more. And that, to me, seems like it's one of those things, like, as soon as you hear it and see it, it's like, of course. But it does beg this really interesting practical question. That's the book and the company and the training, all this stuff I'm building now, which is, what does that interaction look like? How do I interact with someone? If I say my stated goal is not to get you to trust me, but to get you to trust you, what practically, tactically, what would those kinds of interactions look like? And that's the kind of stuff I'm working on now, because I find it super fascinating. But if it is solved for trust, but I think we're solving for the wrong trust. And we all talk about being more customer-centric, but it's like, customer-centric is, do they trust us? It's like, no, it's like you had it at customer-centric and then you stopped being customer-centric the second you said, do you trust us? Because that's supplier-centric. It's like, it is this selfless. And so you're so in it. This is why you're just a better person than I am, because you're much more selfless than I am. You really love. And I think that's really beautiful. And it's like, how do I help people? How do I bring a little bit more love in the world? How do I help people love themselves? I boil this down. I don't just say these keynotes very often. I did it on a main stage a couple of weeks ago. This is like third rail type stuff. And for like 250, 400 salespeople, I've been selling for 20 years. It's either going to go really well or it's going to backfire spectacularly. Right. And I went for it. This is a big paper company. I said, I'm going for it. So I said, I'm about to say something that's either it's going to resonate with you, or you're going to think I'm a total jackass. But I said, I want you to just take a minute. And by the way, I think I got 60% of them there. I think the other 40 are like stolen. Who the hell was that guy? But if you think about, because you write about relationships, this is core to your story. And you talk about this very openly, which I think is really beautiful. But if one were to think about, your best friendships, the most meaningful relationships that you have in your life, again, a dear friend, a spouse, whoever it might be, and you think about that person that you love so much, one of the things I think is so interesting is, it's not just I love you. It's not like, hey, I love you. Right. That's part of it. But I think the other part that's just as powerful, if not more powerful, is it's not just that I love you, but I love me when I'm around you. That to me is like, if you think about the very best, at least maybe it's my projection bias, but I think the very best relationships, the relationships make me just kind of glow inside in my life. It's because I love the version of me that interaction brought out. They help me become a better version of me. I don't just love you, I love me when I'm around you. And to me, I'm super intrigued by asking, what kind of sales interaction, what would a sales interaction have to look like for a customer, maybe without the word love attached to it, feel that way as a result of a sales interaction? How do I feel more affirmed? How do I feel more confident in myself as a result of interacting with you? It's not that I trust you, I trust me because I interacted with you. And boy, I will pay for that. I will pay for that feeling, because that feeling is just all powerful, right? That's where I'm at now.
And we all want that. And back to your affirmation, is right. If I affirm those qualities in those relationships, whether it's commercial or whether it's personal, but then also love that person enough to challenge the areas where I think they can do better.
100%. Yeah.
Not in a brutal, hand fist way, but, a number of times my wife has told me that's just not your best self.
Carlos, you're an idiot.
Yeah, that is.
Oh, maybe that's just my wife talking to me, never right?
It is very, very true. I've heard that many times, and it's been well earned. At least I earned it. No, but I think you're right. Because to me, when I say customer centric, it's not about our brand, our materials. It is truly saying what is best for that customer. And to that point, when we first started the company over a year ago, we got a big proposal on the table, like a proposal that you're saying we're starting a company, this proposal, and they were only talking to us. And for a few weeks, and I finally called my partner. I said, this is going to end so badly for us and for them that we have to withdraw. I said, and it sucks. I said, but because it was such great money to get things started, I said, but I don't think it's beneficial for either part. So I called them and said, hey, no, you're not talking to anybody else. I know this kind of puts you in a hard spot, but we're going to withdraw And I said,
Yeah.
it's not going to be good for you. And this is going to end in a bad marriage.
Yeah. You know what that is? I think that's the voice of experience talking. It's not because we're older and wiser. It's just because we've learned the hard way. Do you know what I mean? There's certain school, like you've gone to the school of hard knocks one way or another enough times, you realize
I've
failure.
named after me at that school. Just
You know what I mean? Right? It's like, because I had a potential client call me there. It's like, we want training, sales training on this. And they kind of laid out to me and said, first of all, I'm not really a trainer per se. I could probably help you with that. But I said, let's talk about whether that training is even the right thing you need. Have you thought about compensation? Have you thought about org structure? Have you thought about, and a lot of it's like, we want to go from $40 million deals to $100 million deals. So like the size of the deals these people are talking about are massive, right? They want to go from 40 to $100 million deals.
right.
Outsourcing business, BPO. Like, so that was their stated goal as a company. And there's like, so how do we get our sellers to want to do this? It's like, well, if you ask them if that's what they want to do, it's like, because they might be perfectly happy bringing in the deals that they're doing right now. It's like, so it was just very, and so we got into it, and I feel bad because I almost got a little snippy. You can imagine that, me snippy, right? But I just live root caused the problem for them in the call. And I said, it could be training, but I don't think that's where you want to start. I mean, here's 4 other things you probably want to look at before you go into training, whether it's culture, whether it's leadership, whether it's org structure, whether it's compensation, whether it's customer segmentation, whether it's have you talked to your customers if they want to go on that journey. And I think I left them a little overwhelmed, which wasn't really helpful. But so maybe that was unproductive disruption. But anyway, but there was a moment I said, I think what you really want is your sales reps to engage your customers the way I'm engaging you right now. And they said, yeah, how do you do that? It's like, I don't know, just be a pain in the ass.
No, but I think being overwhelmed doesn't mean it's not positive, right? You can.
That's fair. Yeah. As long as you have a plan to bring it back to some sort of clarity, right?
Absolutely. But if you did in that moment, instead of saying, oh, there's an opportunity to make some money here.
Yeah.
Hey, before we get to the training, maybe it's not what you need. So because let's use the word love or have their best in mind.
Yeah.
You didn't affirm you need training.
Yeah.
You came back and said, well, let's dissect this a little bit more. And in the process, worked yourself out of a deal, which is fine.
Yeah.
But put their needs first. And that's when we talk about customer centricity, it's so much more about what do your customers need to hear, far more what do you want to say. Because often like this. And they
although the dirty little secret might be, I don't know how like virtuous I was being about putting their needs first. It may be like, I've contributed to enough people's failure in my life that I'm tired of it. I don't want to watch. I don't want to set someone else up for failure. So look, I've been a parent now for 18 years. I've helped my kids fail for year after year. I'm just tired. It's like, I don't know. I should probably just put myself on mute for the next 40 years. That'd probably be the best thing to do for everybody.
we would not want to. So here's the deal. We're going to get you back on after your book launches and your company launches. I want to hear more about that. I love our discussions. We got to do this more often. I love
Agreed.
Always walk away. I've got notes here, and now I'll be talking about this probably for the next several days. And my wife will just nod and be like, "That's great." But then what she
whatever, Carlos
comes back and she's like, "I was thinking about this," and she always has a great perspective. So I love it. So thanks.
See, here's what'll happen to me is actually what happened at the beginning of this call, because it happens to me a lot in life. Someone will come up to me and say, Brent, I've given a lot of thought and I've been thinking a lot about what you said and what you told me, and I've decided to take your advice. And every time someone says it, my reaction is like, oh crap, what did I say now? And then they tell me what I said. It's like, I said that? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Why would you ever think that was a good idea?
So, but you do that in a business sense. I do that just in everyday life. And here's how it comes back to bite you. So we were in Michigan, just at my family. So I've got brothers and sisters and live up there. Well, I'm at my sister's house and my niece was turning 13 and says to me, I'm expecting for my birthday. But she didn't say that. She said, by the way, it's my birthday and you didn't get me the half chicken nugget that you said you were going to get me.
Whoa.
And I'm like, what? She said, don't you?
What?
Apparently at some time messing around, she mentioned her birthday. So, well, your next birthday, I'm going to get you half a chicken nugget.
Chicken nugget. Yeah. And you didn't come through.
Well, it wasn't her birthday yet. So I still have. However, I pawned off the gift getting. So my poor wife had to go to the grocery store because I'm not going to end up with 5.5 McDonald's chicken nuggets. And literally approached the deli counter and said, can I get one chicken nugget? And the guy's like, so yeah. So and my wife,
well, at least she didn't ask for a half of one.
Right. Well, I took a bite of it, wrapped it up, and then gave it to her. And here's the thing. My wife comes, she's like, you've got to stop saying these ridiculous things because you say so many of them, you forget. And I'm the one left picking up the pieces. So
That's
I
so
mean,
true. You're making a mess for other
thinking
people to
in
clean up.
that professional sense to help people. I just say it because I'm a moron. So
Well, let me offer you a little affirmation. I think you're hilarious.
I appreciate that. I do think I'm the funniest person I know.
I agree with. I am the funniest person I know. That's right.
Absolutely. Hey, I love this. Seriously, you gave us a lot to think about. Thanks for being a guest.
Absolutely.
The Growthology podcast with my good friend, Brent Adamson. And I hope you take what he has said, put it into practice. And we'll put all the details about him and anything forthcoming in the show notes. And we hope you make it a great day. Thanks for joining.
Cheers, everyone.